everybody. I think we're live now. Welcome to the closing session of the Africa Soft Power series, a summit focused on how Africa can harness its soft power to transform its trajectory. The principal focus of this series has been using Africa's soft power to reimagine the continent with all its infinite possibilities. To close the series, we have two visionary leaders who will be discussing the business of creative power and its potential to transform Africa through a collaborative approach, along with the deliberate strategy of rethinking concepts such as infrastructure and investment. We are grateful to all our strategic partners and media partners for supporting this project. And finally, our lead discussant for the day is Sophie Masipa, the founder of Fikira Consulting, a Pan-African consultancy specializing in strategic communications, market entry, and philanthropy consulting. Prior to founding Fikira, Sophie was the head of communications and media relations at the Mo Ibrahim Foundation and led all communication aspects of the foundation's work in Africa and globally. Before that, she was the communications manager and brand strategy and implementation at Brand South Africa, where she was responsible for reputation building and management. She worked on large projects, including the 2010 World Cup and the World Economic Forum. Sophie was also named as one of the top 100 most influential people of African descent under 40 in 2018. Just before I say over to you, Sophie, I just want to say, in Q, do you want to say anything at all?
No, I'll say something a bit, and I'm so excited to be here. Thank you so much.
Okay, Sophie, over to you.
Thanks so much, Obi. Really, thanks so much for that. But really, I'm not the showstopper here. Our guests are. I'm so excited to form part of this wrap-up session of what has truly been a feast of ideas, knowledge, creativity, innovation, and really of conversations across the last 15 days. And how significant is this timing of this conference? I'm so glad to be a part of it. You know, Chadwick Boseman's passing, may his soul rest in peace, has thrust the blockbuster Black Panther to the spotlight, and we're yet again reminded of the sheer force and impact of our stories and their capacity to attract talent. Each day across the continent, people are glued to their TVs, whether it's Nollywood, whether it's SA Film or Egypt and Uganda that they're watching. Within the art space, we're seeing African artists really generating global conversations, whether it's Nelson Magamo and Victor. And African personalities are really breaking geographical boundaries. The Lupitas of the world, the Denais and Nomzamo, who's soon going to be appearing in Coming to America. These are just a few examples, really, of the explosion that Africa is releasing. From a numbers point of view, it is clear that the creative economy, when 5% GDP contribution that the Nigerian movie industry makes, or the music industry in SA at 178 million. There's clearly no shortage of talent, but it nevertheless, it's poor from profiting from it. But as Jerry Maguire said, show me the money. Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Sophie Masipa, and I will be your guide and driving seat tonight. I'm the founder of Fikira Consulting, and the reason I mentioned that is that Fikira actually means ideas. So I'm pretty excited to be part of this conversation. But like I said, and Obi mentioned, tonight we're joined by really, really special speakers. I've been following these two gentlemen for years. Their work is incredible. I have so much respect and admiration for both of them. The first speaker who joins us is Stephen Hendel, who's the founding managing director at Hartree Partners and the visionary producer behind that acclaimed Tony-winning Broadway show, Fela, in the documentary Finding Fela. Prior to Hartree, Hendel was a partner at Goldman Sachs, co-head of the JR and Commodity and Currency Division, and he was a co-head of energy trading from 1986 to 1996. Hendel's Fela, ladies and gentlemen, tied for 11 Tony nominations, the most Tony awarded nominations in 2010, including the leading contender for the best musical. Our next panelist is Hakeem Belo-Osagie, the chairman of Metis Capital Partners and FSDH Group Holding Company. He's a senior lecturer of business administration at Harvard Business School. He also serves on the Global Advisory Council of the Office of the President of Harvard University, as well as Harvard University Center for African Studies, Africa Advisory Board. He also sits on the International Advisory Board of the Brookings Institute, Yale President's International Advisory Board. He's on the board of SEED at Stanford and the International Advisory Board of Econom, which is in Norway. He's the chair of Chocolate City Music Group, a leading Nigerian entertainment company and an advisor to Bridge Academies and Africa Leadership University. Welcome, gentlemen. It's so good to have you on with me tonight.
Thank you.
Stephen, I think I'm going to kick off with you. And really, I'd like to say thank you for investing in Fela and giving him world-class treatment. You know, whether it was Fela on Broadway, the Knitting Factory, Finding Fela, investment in OK Player and OK Africa, you have really been supporting African stories for so long. What's driving this connection and why are they important to you?
Oh, well, it's a really good question to start with. I think it came first from music because I grew up just listening to music pretty much as an adolescent. And the music that I became very, very emotionally involved with was American blues and American jazz. And that all comes directly from Africa. And as I grew older and explored more and more, I understood, you know, I started listening to African artists and African musicians. Actually, I don't know, Ali Fakatoure is a Malayan guitar player and singer, and his music is exactly note for note the music of John Lee Hooker, who was one of the major American blues performers. And I have to say that at one point, a long time ago, over 20 years ago, on the Amazon algorithm, they said, if you like this music, try this music. And there was a picture of Fela Kuti on this yellow and red blazing double album. And I bought the album. I had never heard of Fela Kuti. And when it arrived and I started listening to it, I simply was totally overwhelmed. And, and that began a long period of listening to more and more of his music and understanding his background and his story. And, eventually to deciding to try and create a theater piece about Fela Kuti. And I have to say that when we opened the show and the audience started coming, and the African audience started coming, and the Caribbean African and the Afro-American, then I understood what the show was about. And that really quickened my sense that really the creative juices and the future of creativity in the world was really going to come out of Africa and the young people of Africa.
Wow, that's incredible. Hakeem, perhaps let me bring you in here, because as chairman of Chocolate City, I mean, I'm listening to Stephen. Here he is based in the US, and he took Afrobeats to the US. But you, as chairman of Chocolate City, we've seen a lot of support for the creative industries through your participation there and the label and the group. How can we inspire more ambassadors and business leaders on the continent to invest more capital and facilities to enable these millions of talented Africans?
Thank you very much. I think that there are three things that African business leaders can do, especially for music. I think the same goes for art. I think the same goes for for film. And I see it in three segments. First of all, what I would just say are the very easy wins or the easy things you can do. And I give an example. When I used to be chairman of a bank, we took a decision that what we were going to do, so not of a bank, of a telecoms company, we took the decision that we were going to start having ringtones that reflected or consisted of African music rather than non-African music. And that act alone created a stream of income for a lot of young musicians, many of whose biggest problems is just having that steady income that would allow them to start making new music. So that kind of thing is something that a business leader can do without that much effort on his part, and creates the beginning of something. In terms of art, for a lot of major business establishments, just the act of deciding that you are going to furnish offices in your headquarters or in your branches with African artwork itself gives a market to a lot of very, very young artists. And I don't know whether you know, for a lot of you, United Bank of Africa used to feature a lot of the work of Emopai, okay, and a lot of the work of Enwonwu. So that's one set of things I think you can do.
Yeah.
Then I think a second thing that I think business leaders in Africa can do is under the specific heading of corporate social responsibility. And my sense of that is that I think business leaders need to understand that art, music, ideas, intellectual history, all of these things combine in changing the view that the world has of a continent or a country. And therefore, in the way in which, if you look at sculptures, if you listen to the music that comes from Africa, if you see and read the works of Chinua Achebe or Chimamanda, then you begin to understand and you begin to have a different picture of Africa. And therefore, if only the corporate social responsibility portion of that, more of it was spent on these kinds of soft power projection ideas, as opposed to a lot of the other attention-grabbing events that we normally put our money in, that is a second thing that business leaders can do. And then, of course, I think the third thing that we can all do is where we go to the next level of beginning to invest in businesses. And here, I think that what Steve has done has been excellent, because what Steve has done, he has shown a lot of young Africans and African business folks that it's not just the African audience that is the market, but there's a world market out there, all right? And whether you are putting on a play, some drama, or whether it is art, or whether it is music, that we should see the world as the market and as the stage. And this is something that we should nurture, we should invest, and we need the support of people like Stephen and others to learn how do we scale what we are doing from the local successes in Lagos or in Accra or in Nairobi, and how do we take that to a level at which we are reaching audiences in London, in New York, in Los Angeles, in Chicago, in Beijing, and so on and so forth. And I think the world is ready for that. I was on a holiday last year in China, and we went to this Chinese town. I've forgotten the name of the town. It's a town that has lots of universities there. And I was stunned that as we were taking a walk one evening, we were listening to a local Chinese band, all right? And one or two of their songs were Fela songs. And if anybody had ever told me that you could listen to Chinese folks playing Fela, all right, I would have said, no. That's not going to happen for a few more decades, but it's already happening. And it's an indication of how far we have gone as a continent. And it tells us business folks that there's certainly much more potential in this area than we think.
Thanks for that. I mean, I want to pick up from what you're saying, Hakeem, and actually ask you, Stephen, bring you back here. Because you took Fela globally a long time ago, but what we're seeing now is that African content it's global and it's actually being monetized internationally, but it's not always by Africans who also contribute to the local economies. And never mind the fact that most are not monetizing appropriately in local markets. How do we actually get Africa's creative economy to trigger a value chain that moves between artists, entrepreneurs, distributors, and support services across the multiple sectors?
Well, I want to say one thing to pick up something Hakeem said. You know, it's very interesting that in the United States, the biggest cultural event of the summer was Beyonce releasing her record and her video film. Yeah. And it's entirely suffused with Africa.
Yeah.
And you know, when we were off Broadway, Jay-Z and Beyonce came to the show, and eventually Jay-Z invested in the show. And of all the musicians and artists that came and enjoyed the show, the one who was most influenced, in my opinion, seems to be Beyonce, who for the last number of years has really drawn on African music, African videos, visuals, African artists. And just going back, the you know, the culture, the energy, the vibrancy, the heart, the talent in Africa is a global talent. There's no question that that the entire world is ready to receive African artists and performances. And the one language, and I guess one thing that made me be very you know, willing to, you know, so obsessive about music, it's the one language we all have in common.
Yeah.
You know, there's no, you don't need translation. You know what Fela is speaking, whether you speak Pidgin, Yoruba or not. And so I think that, you know, it's a tremendous reservoir of human creativity that should feel as if it's part of the global conversation. It's become part of the global conversation with all of the young Afrobeats artists finding a huge Western audience, and it's been growing over the last couple of years. You know, there's one thing that, and I'm not an expert in African protection of intellectual property, but it always struck me that one of the weaknesses of Africa's sort of environmental ecosystem for artists is that there's a lot of piracy, and there's a, you know, there's very little intellectual protection for what they create. And you know, you know, the system in the U.S. is the artist, and by the way, the U.S. history of artists and intellectual property is, you know, is mainly of expropriation and taking advantage of artists. But there is, you know, a legal framework by which the creator owns his property and gets compensated for his property, and can't have knockoffs take his market away and his chance of earning his a living from his creativity. And that's something, it seems to me, that Africa can strengthen, so that there's an economic incentive for young artists to know that if they create, they're protected, and they'll be able to have a way of making a livelihood out of what they do. I don't know, Hakeem, how you feel about that.
Yeah.
Look,
I was
Stephen,
going to bring.
Stephen, I would agree with you totally on that point. And that is that creativity needs structure. Okay. And if it is going to be successful and productive, it needs a legal structure. And I think that legal structure is there in a superbly detailed manner in Europe and in the United States. We also see that legal structure there in India, in the film industry. So the film industry in India has taken off because it's also more structured and has more legal protection. And we need that legal protection in Africa as well, if it's going to take off either in the cinema or in music. So, you know, Stephen, I couldn't agree with you more on the supreme importance of that. And then I think the second thing that we need, and interesting enough, it's something that I find happening in Africa, in not just in the creative arts, but also in sports, for example, and that is, you need organization.
Yeah.
Okay, and organization and structure is so crucial. So you'll find that behind every great singer, there is an agent, there is an organizer, you know, who handles his logistics, who plans his career, who negotiates his various contracts with him, and who's a trusted advisor of his. And now we have we have whole organizations that are devoted to doing this kind of thing. We have the same thing in the world of soccer. We notice that a lot of the talent in African soccer, for example, who have put Africa on the map in the world in soccer, again, you will notice that they are now part of organizations like the great football clubs. And therefore, I think that we are going to require, and I hope they will end up being joint ventures, and it's one of the things that the Chocolate City has been trying to do, I mean, is for Chocolate City to work with major entertainment companies in the United States in a collaborative manner, in which what the African companies are doing is sourcing the talent that's available for them, but the monetization of that talent, the road shows, how an image is developed for an artist. These kinds of things, I think, are things that you need international companies working with African companies to make a success of. And I think if we do that, I think we'll have done very well.
I agree with you.
Yeah. So please.
Sorry, Hakeem, I wanted to, while you're finishing your sentence, I mean, I'm listening to you speaking about companies specifically, and yes. I like the point you make about structure, right? When you look at the FCTA and you look at the creative industry, part of the key challenge for that integration to take place is actually the issue around IP, in that only a few of the countries actually have proper IP laws. So what should protection look like from an African point of view? Because IP across the world, is it going, do you envision this looking the same? Or do we create protection systems that are relevant for the continent?
I think that the basic IP laws are probably fairly standard. And I think that for a lot of us in Africa, it's more execution. It's more that the law should be properly obeyed, and it is the backup, that is the having the agencies that enforce those laws, and having a system of courts in which, if in fact the laws are broken, that people involved will be punished for what they do. So therefore, impunity does not take place. But I do think that the IP framework exists, and at most all that needs to be done is maybe a little bit of fine tuning for some local variations. But the basic law, I think, is there, or it is within reach.
And I guess, just to take from the point around this collaboration between African companies and the US, and this question can be answered by both of you, but Stephen, I'll start with you. If I come back to the global movement, the Black Lives Matter movement, what do we see as the most important collaborations for Africa to make today, and how do we think we can build this global solidarity?
Well, that's a good question. Again, I think, it's very interesting. In the United States, from the 60s, really until Fela opened, African Americans were sort of trained to disassociate themselves from Africa. I think one of the things that Fela did, and I realized, and it was very noted upon while Fela was performing, that it was really the first time since the 60s, since the Black Power movement and Stokely Carmichael and others wearing dashikis, that Africans and African Americans were sort of sharing a conversation. And I think, culture is a way of doing that. The world is very siloed. COVID has actually probably set back the integration of the world with everybody even more siloed at this point, and the absence of travel. But the overwhelming reality is that the technology is there for us all to see each other every day. Whatever happens in Lagos is reported within minutes in New York, and vice versa, and everywhere else. every young person in the world is empowered with cell phones to record what's in front of them that they're unhappy with, that they're happy with, and share with everybody else in the world. And we all have this ability to speak with each other in ways we've never had before. And, you know, I think we need, you know, we need businesses, we need publications to bring us closer together and report to a common audience. And we need to not give up. You know, I think you know, Martin Luther King said the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. And, you know, and even though right now, and I'm speaking from an American point of view, which, I mean, this is like the most troubling and dark period in the United States, you know, probably ever. And I can tell you 1968 was reasonably dark, but, you know, we will prevail. And the things that unify us, the ability to enjoy each other, to share thoughts, ideas, creativity, energy, you know, is what we have to focus on. I don't know if that's fully responsive. Yeah. I don't know.
Thanks. Hakeem, on the same question around BLM movement and what you see as global solidarity. I'm South African, so if I think about the Free Mandela era and what soft power really played in that movement, and how even as Africans we rallied behind each other, how do you believe that Africans we can build global solidarity in the support of BLM movement?
Look, I think we just need to remind ourselves, and Stephen did an excellent job about that, by going back to the 50s, the 60s, and the 70s, to know that solidarity was always there. And in many senses, in strengthening that solidarity, we're just walking down a path that has already existed, that already exists. And we just need to walk down that same path of collaboration and solidarity more than we were doing before.
Yeah.
And I give some examples. I think there was the great singer, Harry Belafonte, all right, who Steve will remember. Many people here may not remember Harry Belafonte. I believe he was the person who introduced this delightful South African lady with an incredible voice called Miriam Makeba, all right? And Miriam Makeba was for a long time the voice of South Africa, the voice of the anti-apartheid struggle in the United States, in Europe, and in the rest of Africa. I think that the number of probably more Independence Days that she sang at than the one she did not sing at. The only one that I know that she did not sing at was the South African Independence Day itself. But in many senses, she was the voice, and she was introduced to the world, I think, by Harry Belafonte. That was a classic case of collaboration between the two. And then we mustn't forget that, and lots of people may not know this, the great Fela himself, when he came back from England, played a form of classical and jazz music that was not a hit in the early 60s. And then he took a trip to the United States, all right, and paradoxically and amazingly came back with Afrobeat. Okay, but in many respects, he was very much inspired by the States to become politically conscious, but his music style actually changed. And he launched Afrobeat after a long visit to the United States. It's an amazing cross-fertilization.
It was created in Los Angeles.
Los Angeles, very, very much so. And people forget this, you know. And then when you think of the drama from South Africa, I don't know whether people still remember this great musical called Ipitombi.
Ipitombi.
Yeah, Ipitombi was what kept alive the dream of a free South Africa in so many parts of Africa. And I think therefore we need to do more of this in a very, very concerted and a deliberate manner. I think that the collaborations that Paul Simon did, I believe, with lots of South African singers was good. And then recently there was a collaboration between Marcus Miller and some West African singers and West African musicians, and which I've seen as well. And I think that more collaborations between famous American artists and African artists, in some way, it's a way of introducing them to a much bigger audience. And I also think that I want to go back to the novels, Chimamanda's, but novels written by East African writers, Southern African writers, all of these, which end up being read by teenagers, read by university students in different parts of the world. All of these go towards establishing a picture of Africa in which we are human beings reacting to the same kinds of impulses that human beings, whether they be Asians or whether they be Americans or whether they be Europeans. And it reminds everybody in the world that there's a basic essential humanity which is common to all races. And if people are schooled, are educated with that in mind, then I think that their worldview changes as they grow older. And I believe that it makes our overall political situation, the overall economic situation in the world, less one of hostility, but one of cooperation. So I think that this issue of soft power and the influence it has on peoples is important, not just because of our enjoyment of music, though it's great fun, but I genuinely believe that it also, in its own way, even if at the margins, makes for a more peaceful world.
Very nice. Stephen, perhaps to bring you back here, you are a renowned entrepreneur who's made your way the traditional way. How do you see the future of entrepreneurs in the soft power space, and what advice would you give? I know you spoke quite a bit about technology in your last response, but where we are, how can brands and African businesses strategically use the power of soft power?
Well, first of all, there's if you are an artist, if you're a creator, if you want to be involved in producing content and contribute to a global conversation, you are driven to do that. If you want to be a doctor, you want to be a lawyer, you want to be a scientist, you're driven by a different kind of passion. I think it's the people who are going in that direction are doing so because they have the talent to do so, and they have the commitment and something inside of them that's their passion, and they see that as their mission. It's I'd say one thing: in Europe, the governments really finance and support artists and support theaters and concert halls and musicians, and they do it in a very, very intelligent way, and it's something that is not done in the United States, or has not been done. We used to do it in the United States in the 50s and 60s, when the State Department would take Dizzy Gillespie and Duke Ellington, and he would bring them on tour around the world as a representative of, a creative side of America, of a soft side of America. And it was very, very effective, and it hasn't been done in any scale for 20, 30 years. But in Europe, the theaters in many countries are financed by the state. The artists are financed by the state. A Norwegian artist gets state money to go on a tour in the United States, and that's how the tour is made possible financially. And I wonder to what extent that is something that African governments, can start, considering. In the United States, I doubt that I think we're too far gone to, have the idea of the government do something like that. But I think it's been very effective as a way of encouraging the arts in Europe. I don't know, Hakeem, how do you feel about that?
I think I would agree with you that there's got to be a lot of state support, and that can happen at the federal level or at the state level. For example, in Germany, a lot of the support comes from the provincial government level. All right, in Africa, we will need that. But I also feel that right now there are enough large corporations on the African continent, and there are sufficiently number of substantial business folks who I think can support young artists and can go further than just supporting the young artists, but can also assist them in getting the necessary relationships with international foundations, with international business groups, so this becomes a collaborative venture. I think there has been something of a fear among some artists that the states and a lot of African governments may seek only to support artists who are pro-government or who are singing a particular tune, and to the extent that happens, I think that businesses in a way provide a politically neutral way of giving support to artists, and then when you look at some of the festivals, whether it's art festivals, whether it's music festivals, or whether it's book festivals, a lot of corporates can come together and have come together to support these events, and where they have done that, part of the power of the government to unduly influence it is neutralized to some extent. So the government is another donor in this event. But I have to say to you that if I go that I just have to make this comment that I don't know whether you've seen it, Steve, but there's this wonderful picture or this wonderful thing on the social media. I think it's the United States Navy band, and they're playing Fela.
Yes, I have seen that.
And there's this lovely white guy who is playing. I'm not sure if it's Burna Boy or not, but he's playing it in the New York subway. All right, and those two events, shall I say, they are so warming and they're so encouraging, and they are such beacons of hope in what, as you say, in many respects looks like a very dark world.
Yes. Yeah, Hakeem, you spoke about the state support and
yes.
Steve also spoke a lot about it. So one thing that strikes me a lot is, and you've spoken a lot about how African corporates, how African investors can come on the table to support. But a lot of times you actually see Africans investing in other platforms, in other, like when Macron came to Nigeria, there was a big announcement around the Alliance Francaise investment. And yet the Fela shrine could have done with the same investment. Why are we more inclined to invest in other people's work, other areas where we're always ready to jump and support other people except our own work? Is it a self-esteem? I'd like to get to grips with that.
I wouldn't say that. Maybe we're not giving ourselves enough credit, but I do think that when let's just think about music right now. Chocolate City is doing a lot of very good work with both Shehu and Femi Kuti in supporting and promoting the stuff that they're doing. There are other music companies who are doing a lot in promoting a lot of the other artists. I think that when we look at, I think my classmate Atidor Peterside and his daughter have done a lot in terms of bringing having this great art festival, this great art exhibition to Nigeria. And they've done it for the last couple of years. And I think ArtX is getting bigger and bigger and bigger
And bigger.
each year. Okay,
Yeah.
so obviously none of these things will match the publicity you get when the president of another country shows up, okay, and makes an announcement. But I think whether it's in cinemas, it's in films, good and quiet work is being done. Now, what is true is that the banks, I think, remain a bit nervous, okay, about extending loans, all right, for some of these ventures. And I do think that one of the things that the central bank can do, and I think it would be a good thing that they do it, and I think the central bank is actually trying to see what it can do, is if we can all agree that banks should be allowed to set aside a certain amount of money each year, all right, to support the arts, to support films, to support the creative industries, and with the understanding that they may be allowed to write this off over a longer period of time. It can be a longer term loan, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And I think that this would be a very good initiative. And I think banks would probably be a bit easier at devoting a certain amount of their money for that, or going into ventures that do look a bit risky, but if one or two of them pay off, it will go a considerable distance. Have to also add the very good work that Afrexim Bank is trying to do in supporting that. And I do hope that other regional institutions like the African Development Bank, I do hope that they follow suit as well.
Yes, I also picked up, thanks for that, Hakeem, and also, contextualizing the issues. Because I also picked up another fund, it's the African Culture Fund, which came out of Mali. It was launched sometime last year. Stephen, so I'd like to get your views about the world of finance and government and how they can best support the innovators and creatives to create these types of funds or instruments. You at the forefront of this. What are some of the mechanisms we can put in place?
This is public sector or private sector?
Private sector.
Private sector. I think, I think that, at the end of the day, I think the successful business people should realize that you can't take your money with you, and when you die, what's going to live beyond a business career is what you did and what you gave, and what you left behind is really going to be the soft reputation that you created, and it's not how much money you make or how much money you hoard or have, it's what you do with monetary success. I think that is, sort of a mindset that successful business people and entrepreneurs have to think about. In this country, Warren Buffett and Bill Gates, led some huge number of the wealthiest people in the country to pledge that they would give half their money away in their lifetimes. And one of the best ways of giving money is through supporting the arts, because I think that where can you do your philanthropy? You can help build hospitals and help run hospitals. You can support educational universities and things like that. And all of that is very important, and it's very establishment. It's a little less establishment to support young artists and nurture young artists and support the creation of human content that can reach people all over the world in many, many ways. I say this, when I had the passion and inspiration to, work to create the musical Fela. The thing I learned the most from it is how resonant it was. I mean, I have to say, it's, it was in, Sophie, you mentioned 2010 was our season, it's 10 years ago. It's a long time ago. There isn't the day that goes by that someone doesn't write me, call me, contact me, or somehow I'm involved in something regarding a person's reaction to that work of theater art. And, and it's tremendously enriching for, how I spend my time and what happens during my day. And I think that business people should realize that that's open to them, that the world needs people who are willing to support the arts and human expression. And the way human expression means that it moves people's hearts. And at this point in time, what a young Nigerian composer or a young South African singer or a young singer in Eritrea, can create, can make somebody weep on the other side of the world. I must say I'm friendly with a Tunisian singer. Her name is Amel Mathlouthi, and she puts things on YouTube. And when you go and see her stuff on YouTube and you read the comments, they're in Farsi, Arabic, French, Turkish, English, Spanish. They're in languages all over the world. And so, I think the business community has to embrace the idea that this form of philanthropy is a way of having your culture have a footprint and a presence and an influence on how people think and react and believe and go forward the next day all over the world. So that's my little speech. And again, I hope that's responsive. Not sure it is. But it goes to what Hakeem is talking about, and Hakeem knows the African business community a lot better than I do. But the African business community should be supporting, creating a contact between African artists and African thought and culture and the world's conversation. And it will have a tremendous benefit and presence and productivity for everything and everybody in Africa. And by the way, the world will benefit from it enormously.
Yeah, I agree with you. There were 1.2, 1.3 million people who tuned into the Brandy Monica battle on Tuesday evening. Michelle Obama was there, Joe Biden was there, Kamala Harris popped in to give a bit of a tribute. I wish we had platforms like that on the continent that help us every time an artist launches, that can allow us to benefit from the power of the numbers. Kim, the one thing that you raised earlier on was this notion that there are so many good African initiatives happening, and yet people don't know about them. We only see the ones, I guess, if like a president has come through. So what is the role of effective communication? What would you like to see happen to improve kind of our standing and how we communicate about the work we're doing?
Well, I'm not being mischievous, but that is something that you in particular, you are so well equipped to do yourself.
You are being mischievous.
But on a very serious note, you see, to me, the fascinating thing right now is that, what modern technology allows us to do, it really allows a person, who is in Cape Coast, Ghana, or a person who is in Bulawayo, Zimbabwe, or a person who is in Morocco or Mobile, Alabama, to communicate relatively inexpensively, right? And I use the word inexpensively, fully understanding that there's some people who are living on a couple of dollars a day, and which was not the case 30 years ago. So I think that what we're really looking for is, one is business groups need to be, shall we say, more systematic. I think that one of the things I notice about foundations in the United States, or business in the United States, they're much more systematic about their giving, in the sense that a decision is taken. I'm going to focus on the following areas, and I'm going to research these areas. I'm going to give in those areas. Whereas I think that a lot of business folks in Africa, you tend to give to the person who harasses you the most, okay, partly to get him off your back, or partly because something catches your particular fancy, and then you say fine, or there's a good contact who calls you up, you know. But I think business groups have to be more systematic in saying, I want to make an impact in this area, and this is what how I'm going to go about it, and this is what I want to do. But I really do think that that the proliferation of TV channels, Instagram, social media, and so on and so forth means that the huge communications and PR industry, in which there are many Africans involved, both in Africa, but also all over the world, in the States, in Europe, they will play a big role in terms of letting the world know what is available and helping that message that we're trying to get it out. So that, for example, next time round, it's Burna Boy and Michelle Obama, or it's who knows, or it's I'm sure there'll be a great South African artist who may be appearing on some things. It may be with Meghan, it may be the what's her name, Meghan Markle and Prince Andrew, who knows, all right? Or I listened to this lovely all-female music band in Accra over the Christmas and the New Year, and I was blown away by that. It would be lovely to see that all-female band perform, okay, in other parts of Africa, which would be uplifting to other African women, and also in other parts of the world. So I think, to summarize, what I'm saying here is that the technology is there for us to do this, and I look forward to people like you, Sophia, to help us in getting it done.
Of course, but I still think that Barack Obama played a huge role in lifting even the American soft power. He went beyond the call of duty as a president, the rapping. I mean, you see it even, Michelle would jump into cars and sing, and they really did a lot of work for that space, and it's almost like, how do we get, I think some of our leaders do it. If I think about Paul Kagame, has really done quite a bit from where I'm sitting, for the basketball industry. How do we get our leaders to do a bit more for the fashion industry? When we look at that AU picture, the AU family picture, you see a sea of cultural clothing.
I take your point, given the way I'm dressed right now. For the next show like this, I'll dress appropriately.
Don't worry.
Can I say one thing? I want to say, the great human reservoir of the human talent in the planet in the next 30 years is largely the young people of Africa. Just demographically, Japan, Western Europe, Russia, the populations are getting smaller. China, they had the one-child policy. Now there's only one child and the parents are older, and it's sort of backwards, the demographics. And the growth of world population is going to be in Africa. And these young people in Africa are going to be where the energy of the planet comes from as populations decline elsewhere. And so you have in Africa, this really, sort of resource. I'm not sure that, I know everyone's aware that the population of Africa is going to grow enormously, but just think of it as a resource like, gold or oil or something else. How do you develop it? How do you educate it? How do you lead it? How do you excite it? And then how do you bring it to the world as an export of the continent? To have Africa have its say and contribute its point of view to, how people consume culture in the world. I'm convinced that that's the reality of the next 30 years of where the dynamism and thought leadership and energy comes from. And, I think it's really important that the senior people on the continent, and I would say, you're all old enough to be in that category. Maybe Nakuru, you're sort of on the younger scale of that. But that's something that is really worth thinking about. Obi, you're not old. I mean, but you're seasoned enough to be able to make that kind of contribution.
I'd like to point out that
I'd like to take a question. I wanted to take a question. Can I take questions, Nkiru?
Yeah, please go ahead.
There's a question here, and I want to pick up because I want to pick up from where Stephen left off. Question for you, Stephen, is what are some of the challenges you faced with respect to building a sustainable media business focused primarily on African content?
Well, it's very difficult. How is it? I'll say this about Fela. Okay. And you can see I have a sort of idealistic streak in me. And I idealistically believed that if you created a really, really outstanding show about something of substance, with social content, with beautiful performances, with amazing music, with this dramatic story, and you did it in a really, really strong way, that you would have a commercial success on Broadway. And frankly, it was a very uphill struggle. And in the end, we had a very large cultural success that still resonates. We did not have a financial success. And it is, and it was because, in my opinion, America is very insular, and the American white culture was not ready for it. And in the end, Americans with their mindset and their insularity were more interested in seeing something else than seeing Fela. And but that doesn't mean that first of all, it just means that you have to keep moving and keep trying and keep doing, because in the end, what's happening is the world is getting smaller. People are getting closer. People are getting more. They're becoming more open. I think, by the way, one thing that's very interesting is Black Lives Matter and all those protests in the United States are supported by the majority of the people in the United States. And in the 60s, when we had the Vietnam War protests and things like that, it was they were opposed by the majority of people. And to me, that's an indication that that we're making progress. You just have to be willing to commit to making the best thing you can, supporting the artists you believe in, communicating the ideas you believe in, and working hard. And over time, that quality and that message, you have to have the optimism, will succeed. I don't think I don't have a different answer to that. I know, Hakeem, you're
Hakeem.
I would agree with you. And I think it's good that you've been very frank and very blunt. And that's why I try to start out by saying there's some low-hanging fruit that businesses can do right away, which doesn't cost us too much. There's the second, which is when it's part and parcel of your corporate social responsibilities. The third, which will take us much longer, is turning it into a business. And that will still take time, okay? And we need to go down that route, because that's what's going to make it sustainable. That's what's going to allow us to be able to do it over and over again. Now, I think that the good thing about it is that at the very least, people are now taking these areas seriously, okay? And I think that, for example, it's one of those cases in which it's a question of timing. When you look at the musical artists in the 50s and the 60s, a lot of them sadly passed away with not very much money. And then you had another generation of musical artists who were basically employees of organizations who allowed them to do this in their spare time. And then Fela is probably one of the first that lived off of it completely. And then you have the Burna Boys and the rest, another generation who will be making significant amounts of money. I think that once you have the first big hits, whether it's drama, okay, or whether it's music, I think that what it's going to do, it's going to open the floodgates, all right, to a lot more interest, a lot more business money going into this, and people will begin to work out what's the best way, how do we go about it? I'm sure a significant amount of the stuff that problems you had were things like the audience, okay? Yeah. The audience, how you get the audience, how much it costs to book a place, all right? How long is it going to run? And as it becomes, as I think that we go further and further and we have one or two big hits, it will become more and more normal and more regular. There was this great play which Ifeoma Fafunwa did called Hear Word as well, which I think was just superb in the way in which it portrayed the significant dilemmas, the significant issues that women on the continent have. And what it did, I think, so well is that it made it clear to everybody that women of Africa are not silent. And they have a voice. They wish to speak. They wish to define themselves in a way which is not completely defined by men. They too had some difficulties as well in terms of making this into something that was more profitable. But my sense about this is that if Stephen, these three folks were kind enough to invite us to talk again in 10 years' time, I have the funny feeling that in our croaky voices at that time, we'd be telling a story of a considerable amount of success having been achieved.
Yeah, definitely. So I want to ask a question about, the slowness to invest in the space, because generally we go soft power, I'll say hard power, in that infrastructure. Generally, when we talk about infrastructure and financing, people want to invest in infrastructure, hard physical structures, right? But soft power is also a mental infrastructure,
Yeah.
Should we even be saying things like soft power to get in front of those spaces? Or is there a way we should be redefining what infrastructure means to capture investment in knowledge and ideas?
Well, if I can just say, I'm not so sure that we need to do that. I just think that we just need to get it out there, all right, that it makes sense, or that it's a good thing, to have art, to celebrate art, to support art, and to enjoy music and to support music. And you'll be amazed at how far these things go. I mean, let me just give you a rather off the wall example. If anybody had told me 20 years ago that university graduates in Nigeria, in particular, could abandon being lawyers to being professional comedians, and that Nigerians would actually pay people to tell jokes at dinners and parties and conferences, I would have said, no way in hell will that ever happen. But we've seen the development of an industry of comedians in Nigeria, and there are lots of comedians in Nigeria who are doing far better than some doctors and some lawyers and some engineers, and I think that's a good thing that is happening. So I think that young people are now looking at more and more different types of careers, different types of callings, and I think that their parents are much more willing for them to try these things, and I believe that businessmen are going to be far more willing to support such people, because they're going to realize that then it's not as risky as you think, and there are not as many alternative investments as you think right now in a lot of the African space. So we're going to be seeing more investments and more money in Africa, I think, going into tech areas and into the creative industries.
Stephen, which of Fela shrines did you visit? Did you experience?
Pardon
That's
me?
just one of the audience members wants to know.
What's the question?
Which of the Fela shrines did you experience?
Well, I experienced, the one in Acacia. I mean, I went to the family's music venue. We actually, we brought the show first to the family's New Africa Shrine, which was an amazing place to stage the show. And I think very appropriately, it was the right place to launch the show when we came to Lagos. And we played for 8 performances at the Echo, which was also a fantastic experience. And during that time, I went to the museum. It wasn't a museum at that point, but that's, where Fela lived at the end of his life and where he's buried. So that's, in my during my visit to, to Lagos, that's what we did during the day. Was we went around. I had a film crew with us because I wanted to document the experience of having the Broadway show in Lagos. And some of the scenes of our time are in the movie Finding Fela, including this fantastic scene where Lemmy Gariakwu is giving us a tour where the original shrine was and the original Kalakuta was, and talking about Fela crossing the street and going to the music venue, at 2 a.m. I'd say I was, the week that 10 days or 2 weeks I spent in Lagos during that time was so eye-opening. I came away saying, oh my God, there's all these people just filled with juice and thoughts and energy and vibrancy. And the other thing just that stayed with me, and it goes to something that Hakeem said about how global Fela's, Fela, the creation of Afrobeat is so global in its nature. But when you tack on the show that this artist from Nigeria who went to America, discovered American Black consciousness thought in the 60s, changed his music, reinvented himself, recorded the first Afrobeat record in Los Angeles, came back to Lagos, stood up to the government, passed away. And then 10 years later, these American artists are inspired by his story and his legacy and create this show that then comes to Lagos and redefines Fela's legacy in Lagos. Because one of the things that I felt, and Hakeem, I'd be very interested, and Obi, in your thoughts, is I had so many 30-year-old young people, 25, 35-year-old people come up to me and say, I just didn't know. I just didn't know this story. I didn't know what Fela stood for. I didn't know. I thank you for, letting us understand who Fela was. And, again, it's like, I hate to think of Fela as this like global ping pong ball being batted around between, America and Nigeria. But in some senses, the whole thing is just this global conversation. And I think it's, it's still, to me today, it's hugely inspiring, I have to say.
Yeah. Hakeem, you spoke a lot about how different, 10 years is going to look. I mean, 10 years for Steve and Fela is looks different based on where the world is and creativity. And you've spoken now about the next 10 years looking very different because parents are more accepting. You're in the education space. Do you think there's a need to overhaul the education space to speak for this soft power, because really, if you look at many of our countries, education is in crisis. You know, how do we use technology? How do we use the moment that we're in to overhaul education so that it speaks back and kids feel like it's okay to go to art school, it's okay to do all these, to study all these, to a business degree that's coupled with an art degree.
Yes, yes. No, I think that there are maybe two. I think that we are ready for, let's just say, maybe a second or a third revolution in education on the continent. I think the first revolution, I think, took place in largely the 1960s and the 1970s, and that was very much one in which, rather than study history from the point of view of the European incursion into Africa, we now started to study, the history of Africa pre-colonialism. We could understand what colonialism was about, and so on and so forth. And I think that we stopped studying about the four seasons in Europe and the prairies in Canada, and we started understanding the geography of Africa. So I think that was one major revolution in education that took place. And I think that now, after 40, 50 years of independence, and in the case of South Africa, I think 20 years of independence, I believe, I think it's time for us to have another look at education and what we're teaching young ones. And I think a substantial element of that has got to be how we teach our young people to be more entrepreneurial than they were before, to have a much more self-reliant, less government-dependent approach, for them to see themselves as both Africans, world citizens, and people who go beyond their increasingly unfortunate ethnic and religious divides. So I think education needs to be more unifying. And it's one of the things that I do hope very much that the arts, the drama, the music, I do hope that it can provide a unifying influence within the various countries of Africa. And at the same time, I also think that we need, in a sense, to be reminded of our cultural heritage. To some degree, I think that the search for great engineers, great doctors, and the rest, I think to some degree, it has put those elements, aside. And it's almost been as if, for many years, at least when we were growing up, as if art and the rest are sort of nice to haves. They're not a very, very central part of your life. And I think that we need to put those things, back on the burner as something that is of critical importance in our overall education.
Thanks for that.
Yep.
Steve, there's another question here, and you touched on Beyonce earlier on. And the question asked is, does the collaboration Beyonce recently had with Nigerian, South African, Ghanaian musicians provide any insights into how business people can participate in empowering African artists to get into an international stage?
I think it does. I think it was the biggest cultural event in the United States this summer. And, if people hadn't supported those African artists over the last 10 years of their career and hadn't given them a platform and encouragement, and I'm sure Burna Boy, 10 years ago, Burna Boy didn't have the international success he has now. 10 years ago, 8 years ago, 12 years ago, he was a young man with a dream and with an energy and with a talent, and he needed somebody to stand behind him and encourage him. And I can't comment on his specific circumstances, but all of these young artists need some kind of ecosystem of support. And I think the payoff is to suddenly see that the stars, it was Beyonce in a very African persona, in every single respect, everything she wore, every way she looked, all of the music, surrounded by a variety of African artists and African actors on Disney, on Disney on demand. I haven't seen, I don't know, they haven't published the viewership, but I'm sure that's one of the most viewed things on the planet this year. And, I think for a businessman, not just an African businessman, but any businessman to say, hey, if I'm willing to support talent that I believe in and give them a shot and help them make themselves known, they can have this kind of payoff and I can be part of it. So I definitely think there's a lot of motivational substance in what happened with that film.
Yeah. Hakeem, I want to speak about African-owned platforms to scale. We're seeing a lot of the growth of Netflix in Africa, Apple's moving into Africa. You have Vogue thinking about a Vogue Africa. If you do Vogue Africa, why don't they invest in African platforms and scale those up? Is that the responsibility of an investor?
Well, I think I see that going in two possible ways. The one way is that in a lot of those organizations, I've had the benefit of speaking to some of the most senior officials in those companies, like Netflix, like Facebook, et cetera, who are Africans, and just reminding them of the supreme importance of using the positions that they're in to help, in a sense, create an agenda that is good for the corporation and at the same time is good for Africa. And I have found among a lot of them that they are generally very keen to do that. So I think that we will see more and more African content in a lot of those giant organizations, and I think that on the whole is a good thing. I think that the question that's between the lines that you may be alluding to is a certain fear of, shall I say, what cultural expropriation that you may be worried about. Are they going to take us over? Yes, that threat exists, and I think the Europeans are probably as frightened of that as the Africans or the Latin Americans or the Asians, and that danger is going to be there. But I also sense, for me, that there will also be space for African platforms because there are so many market segments, and I think that there will be some market segments which a huge American tech company, it's just not worth their while, just in terms of the size of that market and the dollars and cents in that market. And I do think that African platforms can do very well there in those particular areas, and I think they can also do very well in collaborations. And therefore, I think we'll see a flowering of both aspects of this.
Yeah, I think first of all, I would say I think that's a very, very astute observation. And I also just say, just to give you an American perspective, those organizations, we in America are also afraid of those organizations. And we're very afraid at the moment of Facebook. Africa's a huge place. And there's going to be, I'm confident that there will be, development of African platforms alongside these big global behemoths. And I think it's very interesting the extent to which the leadership, the creative leadership of some of these companies are dominated by Africans. Netflix, the people who vet Netflix's programming are Africans. So that, it's very, it's an interesting thing to realize that, that Africa's, got a presence in some of these senior positions in some of these big multinational global companies already.
Which partly is a result, of the brain drain. So, so it is quite fascinating that, yes, we have lost out in some sense in that a lot of very outstanding talent has left Africa to the States or to England, to the Middle East and Asia and various other parts of the world. But what's very interesting is that I'm constantly finding, when I'm in the States, second generation Nigerians, Ghanaians, second generation Kenyans, and so on and so forth, who are doing very good work in the United States, in many respects, helping change the image of the continent in the United States, and partly because of their heritage, are now working in the Facebooks and the Netflixes, in the Googles in the United States, and working very much in the international departments, in the Africa departments, and doing a lot of good work in steering investment and attention onto the continent.
So, I mean, I would love to talk to the both of you all night. I know you wouldn't allow that to happen because there's so much of your history, there's so much wisdom that you have to share. But I'm going to allow you to take about a minute to wrap up on the topic and leave us with your last thoughts before I wrap up, to hand back to Fikira and Obi, who are going to give us a summary of the last 15 days. So maybe I'll start with you, Stephen, if you could just give us kind of your last thoughts before I wrap up.
Well, first of all, I want to thank Africa Soft Power Project and Obi for contacting me. I'm very flattered to be here, and I thought it was very interesting. And I also want to say that Hakeem and I have known each other for over 30 years. And on one of his visits to the United States, a mutual friend introduced us to each other. I think it was around 1988 to 1990. I was certainly considerably younger, and we got along right then and there. And we've stayed in touch all this time. As I said before the show, Hakeem was gracious enough when I was in Nigeria to host me at his home and made me feel very, very welcome. And Hakeem and I are reunited now because we are both on Yale's international policy. And Hakeem and I both have, given money to Yale to support Yale's Africa initiatives. And so, Hakeem, I want to thank you for being on the panel with me, and to say how wonderful it is to be with you today. Okay, and so that's my minute, and I want to thank Nakiru. You did a great job. I'm glad the technology held up. I was afraid I was going to run out of battery and all these other fears of being an old person with new technology, but it was very interesting, and I thoroughly enjoyed myself. So thank you for inviting me.
Thank you.
Yeah, well,
Sophie, thank you for doing such a good job. Okay.
Yeah, well,
Thanks so much, Stephen.
Well, Stephen, I'd like to thank you very much.
But don't get off.
I'd like to thank you very much, Stephen, for the very kind things you say. I just want to add that we both met when we were both in the oil business many years ago, and I want you to know that Steve has two sides to him. He's been a tremendous success in the oil business itself, which is very much a dollars and cents business, and he's also done exceptionally good work in the soft, in exactly what this topic is about,
yeah,
which is the projection of soft power. And it's not many people retain the interest in both and do very well in both. And Steve has done very well in both. And therefore, it was an honor to be able to speak with him. I think that my closing comments are that I say this very much as a African, and what I say I think applies to South Africa, Nigeria, Ghana, most of the countries in Africa. And that is to say that the projection of our soft power is of crucial importance is in how the world looks at us. Because I think that the unspoken assumptions that people have of a group of people, they are so crucial in how they react to that people. And if people do have a sense of you as a race or as a people with a history, with a culture, with your own ambitions, with agency, then I think they react to you very differently where those things are denied. And I think that the projection of Africa's soft power is crucial for the future. That's one aspect. But I think there's a second aspect that is as important, and that is that Africans must not allow the breakdown of our continent as a result of national divisions, as a result of ethnic divisions, as a result of religious divisions. And if there's something that bothers me when I meet a lot of younger people in some African countries, it is the extent of increased bigotry. In fact, in Africa, we have many people who are sounding like younger versions of Donald Trump within the African continent, in the way in which they relate to other young people of different ethnic groups, of different religions, and also of different classes or different income groups. And I think that I do hope that the creative industries, art, music, and all the rest, I hope that they come together in reconfirming, reintroducing to all Africans the sense of oneness and unity, of essential humanity, and in the fact that we're all better off working together, caring for a wider group that goes beyond our immediate family, our immediate ethnic group, our immediate religion, and that we understand that our remit is larger than that, and that we use our imaginations to frame a larger sense of Africa. And I think that art, music, films, and ideas can do that very effectively and successfully. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I'm not going to take up too much time. Thank you so much, gentlemen. What an honor it has been for me. Steve, we owe you gratitude for elevating Fela's music and Africa's music, because after that, really, the world got to know the man. But importantly, most of us know these lines. Ba-da, ba-da. You know, when the music starts, we know who's coming next. Forgive my bad singing, but my grand always said, leave them something to remember you by. Hakeem, what an honor to have watched your life. You know, your soft power moves in the corridors of Harvard, Yale, ALA. They leave footprints and open paths for those who follow behind you. Thank you so, so much, gentlemen, for indulging us tonight. And Kiru, I'm going to hand back to you, and Obi. Thank you for this 15 days of amazingness. And thank you for giving us the platform tonight to just have this conversation.
Thank you so much, Sophie. Thank you, HBO. Thank you, Stephen. It's been an honor and a privilege to have you all on this, conversation and in this journey. 15 days of madness, I would say. Obi, you want to say something, and then I'll just quickly say bye to everybody.
Oh, really? Well, I just want to thank HBO and Stephen. And I mean, it's great to bring you guys back together on our platform. We didn't know the backstory, so that was a good thing to find out here. And Stephen, that journey from Ali Fakatore to John Lee Hooker is an incredible bridge you just laid down at the beginning, which I'm gonna have to go and check that out because I never really thought about it in that context. And HBO, thanks for the insights. I think, Sophie, you navigated us through a wonderful session, and to bring us back home, I mean, the thing we've seen in all the sessions is about collaboration, about having a sort of intentional, cohesive approach by both operators, the public sector and the private sector to push our soft power. As HBO says, I think we believe that our soft power can define and redefine our narratives and give us the power. Even though some people misunderstand it, they give us the power to own our future. So thank you so much. And that's it. I'm done. I said too much already.
Yeah, no, thank you everybody for being here. This has been an incredible, really incredible journey. Particularly, I want to say like an interesting thank you to HBO and Stephen for actually we gave them really short notice and they turned up. There's somebody else we gave really short notice, which is Abogidi, who's the Igwe of Onitsha, the king of Onitsha. We gave him 2 days notice, and he literally 2 days, maybe 1.5 days actually, and he turned up. And that's what we have to do as Africans. We need to turn up. We need to turn up when, on the tables, when the decisions are being made. We need to be in the room. And if we don't take this conversation seriously, then we really don't have any impact. We'll keep complaining that the world's leaving us behind, but it's not. We just need to turn up. And that's, the trust of this is, collaboration, interdisciplinarity, business leaders taking it seriously. If you think about the news of Nigeria in February, we had, I think it was February or March, we had the whole incident of hush puppy. There's a direct correlation between that reputational damage to Nigeria and the ability to, raise money and, have money and travel and all of that stuff. So we have to take soft power seriously. We have to take our culture seriously. And so I'm really, really grateful. Obi and I are really grateful, and the team, really grateful to have all your support. Sophie, thank you so much for an amazing job moderating. And thank you to all our speakers who were amazing, and all the moderators, and particularly to our media partners. I mean, literally, they all just jumped in. So thank you, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. We're really grateful. And, looking forward to more series to come. This is just the beginning. There is more to come, so watch this space. And thank you so much. Cheers and thank you. Bye.
Okay. Bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.